We are back on Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast of PatsFans.com. I'm Russ Goldman. Joining me, as always, is Steve Balistrieri in the right-hand corner if you're watching our video. And in the secret square, the bottom square, is Derek Havens. In this episode, we're going to focus on roster building. We're going to go through all the positions, positional groupings, and we're going to basically discuss should the Patriots be upgrading each one of these positions or groupings via free agency or by the draft. So we're going to break it down that way. We also have some other special topics that we're going to touch on as well. And again, if you're watching live, I hope you are watching live on the Pats Fans Facebook page, Patriots 4th and 2 Facebook page, or Russ_Goldman, my Twitter account. That's where we broadcast live. And this will also be posted on the PatsFans.com YouTube channel. Check that out and please do subscribe. Okay, guys, to start the show, I'm going to get us off by going through a basic Russ's rant. It's in two parts. First part, as you can see, Derek, I want the Patriots to bring back Cam Newton. Here's my reasoning, and it might surprise you, Derek, or it might not surprise you. It's two parts to why I want to bring Cam back.
Nothing surprises me anymore.
I know, Derek. The reason why I want to bring back Cam in one part is because Cam knows the system, and I want a placeholder for the next guy. This goes to me and you wanting a quarterback of the future, placeholder. Cam Newton can do the job. We know Cam Newton can be there. Are they going to do great in 2021? Are they going to win a Super Bowl? Probably not. Even if they do everything right, the chances of them contending for a Super Bowl are slim. Let's be honest here. So I want a placeholder. Bring back Cam. Cam, again, I want to bring him back. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is I want the media to suffer. I want them to suffer terribly. I want them to suffer. So I want Cam Newton back. So Felger and Maz, everyone around them, they're already complaining about Cam Newton potentially coming back. So I'm vindictive. I want Cam Newton back. So the media has to deal with Cam Newton back with the Patriots. So that's my two parts on Cam Newton. My second part of my rant, guys, and I told you I wasn't going to make this long. This involves a very strange conversation going back and forth. Now, this started this morning when I was going to listen to Steve on a great podcast called Locked On Patriots. But before that, I saw an episode with Mike Diabate, who does a great job, and our friend Murph. And I'm looking at the details of it, and it's a lot to do about Gardner Minshew. And I'm thinking, what is this to do with Gardner Minshew? So I thought I would listen. And I'm listening to Murph make his argument why the Patriots should trade to the Jacksonville Jaguars, I kid you not, for either a third or fourth round draft pick for Gardner Minshew. This to me is completely, utterly asinine, Derek. And again, this is why I am including this. I love you, Murph. Love you lots. Love you, Mike, too. But when you guys are including Gary Tanguay in your argument, and again, that to me, you lose me there. Gary Tanguay, in my mind, I'm sorry. I call him the anchorman because he talks like this. I have no, again, he has no respect. I have no respect for Gary Tanguay. Anything he says, it's always just hot button issues, basically saying, look at me. Now, but again, I respect Mike a great deal. He does a great job. But to bring this topic along with him and Murph, I'm just thinking the Patriots don't need Gardner Minshew, Derek and Steve. They absolutely do not. They need a placeholder. This guy, again, I've heard the argument. Murphy was making the argument with me. 5 years. It's a 5-year plan. This is if you do that, then you become the Miami Dolphins with Dan Marino. You need a long-term plan. You need to draft the next guy. And if you're going to draft someone in the third or fourth round, Derek, likely you're not going to draft someone in the first and second round. If you're going to trade that pick, I mean, if you're going to give up that pick for Gardner Minshew, that's what I meant, then you're probably not going to draft one high up when you really need to. You are going to choose Gardner Minshew potentially for the next 4 to 5 years. He's not a placeholder. I don't want Gardner Minshew at all. And the fact that I was listening to this, again, I respect Murph a great deal. But again, for me, it's this outside the box thinking. It's basically, look at me, guys. I'm saying Gardner Minshew. No, I'm saying no Gardner Minshew. And that's the end of Russ's rant. Derek, over to you. Thoughts on both of my parts?
Not bad on time, by the way. I was expecting a little bit more, and I thought it could be worse. No, but I actually agree with you. I'm a no on Minshew. If he was a free agent, I would put him on the table. I don't think. I mean, I can understand the conversation because I think right now with the Patriots, everything's on the table. I don't think you can really rule a whole lot out. That's why even the crazy talk with Deshaun Watson or Russell Wilson or anything like that, it is just talk radio topics, but I really can't rule out anything. I think
it's a waste of our time. I'll be honest with you.
I mean, a lot of what we're talking about right now is going to be a waste of all of our time because I'm sure with free agency and all the free agents that are about to come available, you've already seen the trickle out the next week or so. There's going to be a lot of changing. I'm sure 2 weeks from now, we're going to be looking at a different, picture than what we currently are. But no on me for Minshew. If it was a later round draft pick, you could convince me I'm not trading a third or fourth rounder for him. If he was a free agent, I'd consider it. To me,
maybe a seventh rounder, maybe a sixth rounder.
Yeah, I mean, just like a later round. If they were looking to dump him, fine. I kind of compare him a lot to Ryan Fitzpatrick in terms of maybe a little flamboyancy. Has a tendency to kind of get hot, but he runs real streaky. Throws a lot of interceptions. To me, I just say no on Minshew. What about you, Steve?
Okay. I think it's an insult to Ryan Fitzpatrick, by the way.
Yeah. Let me put on my rose-colored glasses here. No. You can, put a bow tie on a pig. It's still a pig.
Steve, weren't you in favor of bringing Fitzpatrick in?
Yes, but I don't think that Minshew is anywhere close to Fitzpatrick.
Well, obviously Fitzpatrick has a lot more experience, but I mean, obviously we know what he is.
I think Fitzpatrick is much, much better than Minshew.
Sure, but you also could make the argument that in a good program, Minshew's still young enough where maybe he could get better than what he is now. I know what Fitzpatrick is. I mean, it just really depends on what the team ultimately is going to do, guys. I'm kind of curious to see what the team elects to do in terms of the quarterback position because they apparently want to be aggressive. We keep hearing that from all these different talking heads, with all due respect to talking heads. Yep. And, the Patriots are going to try to do this and they're going to try to do that. Well, I just don't really see how. I'm looking at some of these options, and you talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick and Cam Newton and Alex Smith and Gardner Minshew and Marcus Mariota. And
I'm a no on Marcus Mariota. I'm a huge no on that.
I'm certainly more on him than almost anybody else, but not under his current contract. I just look at it and say the best option for me, I think the only thing that's really going to make me happy, if I'm looking at this from just my point of view.
Yeah, I want your point of view here.
Is I think that they need to draft somebody in the first round.
Thank you, Derek.
And they're not going to be able to sit at 15 to do it. Okay. And there's going to be a lot of good players that are going to be around. I really am looking at, the more I look at draft boards, rankings, take a look at all the prospects like we do every year. I think there's a good chance that 8 of the first 10 picks in this draft are offense and a couple more sprinkled in before 15. I think the Patriots have a legit chance at getting a top 3 to 5 defensive player if they want to go that route. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned to you guys, I think the Patriots are going to go defense with their first pick.
Right.
I still kind of feel that way just based on their philosophy of taking best player available. But to me, the more I look at the options, if you want to bring in a veteran quarterback for a year and you let whoever you draft in the first round sit for a year and then you turn the keys over to him, I think that's the only real solution that they're in right now. But you're not going to be able to sit at 15. You're going to have to move up a couple of picks. How they do that, that's a topic for a different day. But I think that's the only real solution there for them right now is move up.
And you and I are kind of on the same wavelength on that, Derek, and that's going to probably upset a few people who want us to argue. But I think we're on the same plane when it comes to that. But guys, on the topic of the quarterback, and we're going to talk about the quarterback with our roster building talk in just a bit, but let's just go here, guys. Okay. Steve, over to you. Now, again, there's been a lot of talk. And actually, as we're doing this show, I actually saw, and I'm going to admit this, guy, Felger Maz is on my TV right in front of me, and there was actually a little scroll that says Greg Bedard has Jimmy Garoppolo as the Patriots' plan A. So I want to ask you, Steve, should we be talking about the possibility of the Patriots trading for Russell Wilson or Jimmy Garoppolo or Marcus Mariota? Should we even go there?
Okay, Russell Wilson, I put it into the Sean Watson category, but that's fantasy land. That's just wishful thinking, hoping we got something really big to talk about. Not happening. The Seahawks, for one, don't have a backup plan.
Right.
So if they're going to trade Russell Wilson, they're going to trade him for another quarterback. I don't see them trading it for Jarrett Stidham. So now, and I'll be honest, for the past week or so, I've been totally negative on the whole Jimmy Garoppolo thing because I didn't think the 49ers were going to trade him to the Patriots.
Right.
But I did see yesterday where the 49ers approached the Carolina Panthers about trading for their quarterback, which makes me think that maybe they're in talks right now about trading Jimmy Garoppolo. And so he could possibly be that guy coming back. I wasn't in favor of bringing him back. I like Jimmy G. I think he's a really talented quarterback, but he can't stay on the field. That's why I don't want him.
Okay.
But and if
so you think it's legit that we should be talking about the possibility of Garoppolo?
Well, I think it's definitely a possibility now because the 49ers obviously are going to draft a quarterback because they approached the Carolina Panthers about trading for theirs. So they're going to do the same thing. They're going to draft a young guy and they're going to bring in a bridge quarterback, which tells me they're going to trade Jimmy G. And so now I think that's definitely in the realm of possibility. And yeah, I think that's fine. But Russell Wilson, fantasy land.
Okay, so you're separating it. How about you, Derek? Do we put these in two categories? Russell Wilson, no. Jimmy Garoppolo, yes.
Yeah, I agree. Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson are a totally different stratosphere. Jimmy Garoppolo, to me, is very much on the table. The 49ers have pretty much told you what they're going to do. The 49ers are basically out there saying, we're going to keep Jimmy if we cannot upgrade. But if we can upgrade, we're gonna move on from him. That's basically what they've said. Now, whether that's by trading for another veteran or drafting a quarterback, we might not know until draft night, which is why the Patriots cannot plan as Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback for next year. I don't really see how Greg Bedard, I'm saying, how he even makes that assertion because to me, unless there's a splash move made prior to the draft, we won't know more about the 49ers' real intentions until whenever the first draft, the first night of the draft is. And then after that, if they move, I think they're at 12 right now. If they move up, into the top 8 somewhere, and they draft a quarterback, well, then all of a sudden now we know that Jimmy's probably going to be available. But by that time, the Patriots are going to be having to make another plan. I mean, by all accounts, they want to know their quarterback situation as early as possible, so they can't wait for that. And while I think Garoppolo is on the table, and it's worth talking about. If you're the Patriots, I just don't understand how you can sit here and just bet on that happening because it's not a sure thing.
So for you, Derek, it's more of a time issue that they need to make a decision now because of the upcoming free agency, and it could affect everything that they do coming up.
Absolutely.
That's basically it.
Timing is going to be key for the Patriots on a lot of these different items, and there's going to be a massive domino effect in my mind. And I think it's going to be interesting here. For one, the league has not set the official cap number, which I know a lot of teams are pissed about. Okay, so they're all mad because the cap number is not set. Free agency's in 2 weeks, but you're already seeing some veterans like tight end Kyle Rudolph for the Vikings get released, and next week it's going to be tens and dozens of other guys just like that because the middle tier veterans are going to be squeezed out in the market the way it's shaping out now. And these guys don't have to wait. That's a good thing for the Patriots. And these vested veterans don't have to wait until the start of free agency. So we're going to be kind of rolling into it here over the next couple of weeks. But I think a lot of teams are waiting for that cap number to be set. But if you're the Patriots, you have a lot of cap space, a lot more than many other teams in the league. But what you don't have is an answer at quarterback. So that, to me, is going to affect whether you can sign someone like Kyle Rudolph if they elect to go that route, or some of these other, receivers, because they're going to be asking the same question we are: who the hell's throwing the ball?
Okay, excellent stuff, guys. All right. Okay, next topic. We're going to go on defense. Now, I just saw an article about this, so I'm curious your view on it. Steve, I'm going to start with you. We've talked about this several times. I was a big no on this, but I'm seeing some talk about it. And your thoughts, your opinion. Should the Patriots trade Gilmore?
Well, do I want to see them trade Gilmore? No, I don't. But are they going to trade Gilmore? Yes, I believe they are.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. He wasn't happy with his money last year. I think that, they're going to look at it. They might be able to help themselves with a pretty high draft pick if they were to unload Gilmore to a team. And there'll be a couple of teams inquiring about him, because there will be a couple of teams that are maybe one cornerback short from being in the mix. And, we saw that Arizona just signed, J.J. Watt.
That's right.
We heard that they were releasing one of their corners. So, do they feel like they're one cornerback away? Maybe. And that might get the Patriots some draft capital. But, do I want to see that happen? No. But, if there's an area that the Patriots are really, really deep at, it's cornerback.
It's cornerback. That's very true.
I mean, they have J.C. Jackson, Jonathan Jones. We saw the rookie, Miles Bryant play really well last year. So they have some depth there, Joanne Williams. So they have some depth there. I think they are going to trade him. I think it's going to happen.
Okay. Over to you, Derek. It's really two parts. Do you want them to trade Gilmore? Should they trade Gilmore? Like I said, and think of it in both terms, but going back to our conversation of needing that quarterback. We want that quarterback. Could this be a chip if they make a trade that they can package to move up in the draft? Do you think they need to do something like this to get that quarterback, Derek? I'm curious your view on it. And again, should they? Do you want them to? And would this be the move to potentially get them to move up the draft board and get that quarterback?
I mean, yeah, that's certainly a possibility. I mean, we talked about this a lot towards the trade deadline, middle of the season, and you both were against moving him. I was fine moving him at the time.
I was against it. I'll be first for a minute.
And we talked about it, during the season. Now he has 1 year left on his deal. I believe he's owed $7 million because they basically last year gave him a $5 million bump and just took this next year's money and gave it to him last year. So, what kind of value is he going to have? I think you're looking at probably a mid to late second round pick at very best, and probably closer to a late second, early third, somewhere around there. So to me, I just wonder, for one, is Gilmore totally unhappy here? Is he just not wanting to come back, or is it strictly just only money based? If it's money based, will the Patriots extend him 2 or 3 years and make him pay, paid along amongst the elite corners in the game? That's a question that we don't know. Would I do the trade? Yes, I would. But you have to understand that by doing that, by moving Gilmore and getting a higher asset, because he's one of the few guys that you can get a legit asset on this team. By doing that, yes, you do have depth at cornerback, but the domino effect starts with having Gilmore as your pillar number one cornerback. And without him there, then you really, the depth chart looks a lot different without Gilmore there. So I acknowledge that if you do move on from him, you're going to have to replace him, whether that's in free agency or the draft. And maybe that's the route they choose to go. And to me, I like J.C. Jackson a lot.
Is he a number one corner?
I don't think he's a number one cornerback. I think he's a good number two cornerback. But that's why you have to.
And that should change this argument, Derek, because again, we've seen what the Patriots have looked like without a number one corner. And this has been my argument from the get-go with him. Why would you give up something that has been so hard to get? They've struggled with this. It goes so far back, all the way back to Asante Samuel. Replacing him, they get Revis, and then, again, we get Malcolm Butler. He does the job, but really, the player that has really taken over has been Stephon Gilmore. So aren't you going to be hurting yourself? Now, again, here's the argument. What's more important, the quarterback or the cornerback? It's the quarterback. But
but the cornerback is the second hard. To me, a lockdown cornerback is the second hardest thing to find in football, right? So,
I agree.
And you can almost make the argument that cornerbacks like Gilmore, like Jalen Ramsey, they're almost harder to find than franchise quarterbacks.
Okay,
so I get that. But the assessment really comes is, what does the team look at with Gilmore? Do they look at him and say he can give us another strong 3 years? We can rip up his contract, give him a new one, and maybe and I want to give credit to Mike Dussault from Patriots.com, he brought up several weeks ago, what if they don't trade Gilmore? What if they trade J.C. Jackson instead? Maybe to a team that wants to give him number one cornerback money. You could probably get a pretty strong asset for him too.
That's actually an interesting way to look at it.
You re-up Gilmore, and then maybe you draft a cornerback to play the number 2 spot. That, to me, is an interesting conversation.
But his age is also an issue, Derek. We've seen this with Darrelle Revis.
Sure.
It can drop down just like that.
And you just don't know exactly where that's gonna, how that's gonna fall off. They have probably more insight to us than we do. Yep. I think Gilmore still has some good ball left in him. And I think that if he does get traded to a contending team, he could give them 2 or 3 years of some real solid play that could help, potentially put a team over the top, like the 49ers. That would make sense to me. The Cardinals would make sense depending on their cap situations. And that's just to name 2 teams right off the top of my head. Obviously, there's a lot of teams. The Packers, next to Jari Alexander. I don't know. But again, the argument really is, what do the Patriots decide to do? Do they move one of these guys? Do they try to keep the band back together? If you're going to keep J.C. Jackson, I really think you got to focus on extending him now. If you wait till he's an unrestricted free agent, he's going to hit the market and blow doors off, because cornerbacks of his caliber, look at the Logan Ryan deal a couple of years ago. We all liked Logan Ryan, the player. We knew what was going to happen as soon as he walked out the door. He was going to get a Brinks truck backed up and he was gone. And I think that's the fear with Jackson too. If you can't lock him up early, it's just depending on what he wants and what they project him to be.
Okay, Steve, over to you, because this is an interesting conundrum that they have. You've already said he's the number one cornerback that they have. J.C. Jackson is not going to be it. But the argument I'm thinking about also, and again, I'm conflicted on this because I don't want them to trade him, but I see the argument that he could turn into Darrelle Revis just like that. So do you cash in now? Do you get rid of him and move on? And again, what I'm reading, the tea leaves, that I'm seeing is that it's trending that way, but these are all rumors. What do you do?
Well, I wouldn't want to trade him. I mean, as we talked about, and Derek just mentioned, finding that number one cornerback is sometimes even more difficult than finding a quarterback. And so that's why I wasn't, all hyped last year about trading him. At the same time, are they going to pay him to keep him here and keep him happy?
I don't know.
And I think the answer to that is no.
Yeah. And if that's the case, then you got to move on.
So if you're going to lose him next offseason anyway, and then you're going to get a 3 for him, a compensation 3, which is the bottom of the 3rd round.
Yeah.
So you trade him this year and you maybe get a high 2.
True. And like I said, then maybe it becomes a chip in this game that we're talking about to potentially get the quarterback that they want. So again, what Derek was talking about, Mike Dussault, that's an interesting concept, because I think when Gilmore was hurt, excuse me, I had a toothpick in my mouth. That's okay.
When Gilmore was hurt, I think the Patriots expected him, J.C. Jackson, that is, to step into that number one and, kind of come into his own, and he didn't do it.
Yeah.
And in fact, he played pretty poorly there for a couple of games, so that's something that might have stuck in their mind. They were like, this guy's never going to be more than a 2, a number 2, and he's going to demand and get big money. So maybe they end up trading him, but I think you're really playing with fire if they decide to do that, because as you said, at this age where Gilmore's at, things can drop off really quick. And
quick. We've seen
what happens if he starts getting more dinged up with his age, and so that's a slippery slope there.
Yeah.
It could work out for you, and it could really, really bite you.
Right. And that's why this is, again, a difficult one for me, because I want the player to stay. But I've seen evidence that shows me that if he does stay, the drop-off could happen whenever. It could happen very soon, and then it becomes a waste of money. And it could be a domino effect, as you guys are talking about. Then you also have the J.C. Jackson situation, which is a good one, but Steve brings up a good point. He's not going to be your number one corner, so that's also a problem. You're going to have a couple of good corners. But we've seen with this team, you need that lockdown corner. You do. You need it.
Well, it changes your defensively. It changes
It
so much
does.
to have that guy. I mean,
It does because it takes away half the field. We've done this so many times.
Yep. You have a lockdown corner, and if Bill can have that guy at cornerback, like Revis, like Gilmore, like Ty Law, okay, and you have the linebackers in his defense, you notice those years are the years.
It works so great.
It's he has the scheme down. It's just about having the cogs for everything, right? So, but it is an interesting conversation. Again, it's fascinating to see what they do there. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I know that's again another big pillar to fall. And if there's a team like, even to your question that you started this off with about Russ about draft capital.
That's right.
I mean, Dallas could use a cornerback. Do they want to move? Do the Patriots move Gilmore in 15 to get their 10th pick? Or maybe the Patriots have to even sweeten it a little bit more, but the Patriots can go up and get a guy like, Fields, or Mac Jones, if that's the guy they want, or Trey Lance, or whoever.
I want them to get the guy that they want, that they covet. And if it takes Stephon Gilmore being traded to get there, you do it, Derek. That's the way I look at it.
And they have to figure out that piece, right? The quarterback, to me, they have a lot of holes to fill. Okay, it's going to be difficult for them to do everything this offseason, which is why I'm not.
But they
my
can
hopes aren't extremely high. But what you can do is
you can build a foundation, Derek.
Exactly.
This offseason.
Yep, exactly, and that starts with the quarterback again. And I'm not expecting that quarterback to come in and play year one. That's okay. Right. I'm okay with that. But you have to go ahead and right now you're at 15. And it's going to be. I mean, I don't know what we're going to have next year. I'm not sure if it's going to be one of those things where we're drafting even higher next year. We're talking about next year's quarterback crops or anything like that. But right now, you have 5 legit quarterback prospects, and certain people love them, certain people hate them, depending on the guy. I can talk myself into all 5 of them, to be honest. But that's kind of a conversation for another day. But if they go up and get someone, I think that's the route they go. And I could see them using Gilmore as an asset to do that. But usually, Russ, the teams drafting at the higher end of the draft are not ones that are contending, this next year. And Gilmore, to me, would only really have a strong value as an asset, as a return asset, for a team that's contending, which is why I think it's going to be like a late second rounder or a late third rounder, depending on what his value is around the league.
Okay. Good stuff. Okay, guys. Third and final topic here of Patriots roster building talk, and then we're going to do something a little bit different that kind of goes along with this. Steve, I'll go to you first. Should the Patriots bring back Kyle Van Noy? I believe you wrote about this, so I want to start you off with this and get your view on this, because again, it's funny. Everyone starts sending me, and I start seeing Instagram of the McCourty twins with the eyes, saying, about Kyle Van Noy. That doesn't mean anything. The bigger question is, should the Patriots bring him back?
Well, I think they're going to make an effort to. One, as we've talked about, the depth at their linebacker position is really, really thin. Even with Hightower coming back, now that'll help a great deal. But you having a guy like Van Noy who was very, very good in this system. When the Patriots got him, I mean, they basically stole him from Detroit, and then he played really, really well for about 3.5 years. So are they going to make an offer? I'm sure they will.
Yep.
Because it just makes too much sense, and that they'll offer him, a 1-year deal where he can play himself into another big contract. But as I wrote this morning, don't just chalk it up as, hey, he's back in the fold.
I wouldn't.
There are teams out there that may covet him, and I'll tell you one is the New York Giants, because there was a lot of interest last year between the Giants and him, and Joe Judge knows Kyle Van Noy quite well.
Absolutely. So, and he's a good leader too. We know he's a leadership guy. So again, and his numbers are similar at Miami that they were with the Patriots recently. You
look at the Giants, they have Blake Martinez in the middle, and then they have a bunch of questions all around him. So Van Noy's another guy that can come in. He's a versatile guy. He can play inside. He can play outside. He can rush the passer. The Giants could use a guy like that.
Yep.
And that's what I wrote about. The Giants or the New York Jets, who are in a similar position, can turn around and offer Van Noy that long-term, deal that he thought he had last year with Miami. So, chalking it up as, oh, this is a done deal. I think it's far from that. I think the Patriots should be, you know,
our friend
making
Claire's
an offer. But, well, Claire
with
wants
you on
him
this.
back. I want him back too, Claire. But just saying you want him back doesn't mean it's going to happen. You have to be realistic about these things.
Exactly. And Derek, over to you, because Steve brings up a good point. I understand where he's going. Offer him 1 year deal, and then he gets his big payday again. But he could be offered a big payday. Why would he want to come back? Now, again, he knows the system. He has a lot of friends here. There are obvious reasons, but the Patriots aren't going to pay him the way he could get paid by other teams. I think that's pretty obvious. There's a reason why he left. One, the Patriots didn't have cap space, but two, he wanted a big payday. I have a feeling he's going to want another payday. He's not going to get it here in New England. He would have to wait a year, like in Steve's scenario, which is play for 1 year and then get your payday, which other players have done. What's your view on this? And should the Patriots bring him back? So it's kind of twofold here.
Well, I mean, let's not forget that Van Noy kicked up a lot of dirt on the way out the door. He had some comments kind of going the Danny Amendola route,
a little bit,
throwing some shade at the organization. So I don't even know. First of all, the first question is something that, again, we're not going to know the answer to. How did they leave? He did leave things between himself and Belichick and the organization. That's the biggest thing to me, for one. For two, you could talk me into a 1 year deal to maybe get another payday, but he's also going to be 31 at that point when he's hitting free agency again. I think he's 30 now. So
he's going to be 30 at the end of this month.
Yeah. So, and then if he played for the Patriots on a 1 year deal, hypothetically, if he hits free agency, now he's 31. What kind of big contract is he really going to get? I don't even know at that point. And, Claire's saying she doesn't want Kyle Van Noy back. I look at it and say, I would be interested if between him and the team were fine on the way out, and the money was good, good value, then fine. What if you're going to ask me what good value is? I don't know. I'm not going to pay him at the top of the market. He's a great fit. He was a great fit in the scheme. Obviously, he's had success here. I think some of his talking, with the boogeyman stuff, kind of got old after a while. But he kind of ran his mouth. I just think the situation with Miami is kind of bizarre. I mean, not enough people are talking about this. It's a 4 year, $51 million deal that he signed, I believe. He was 1 year into it. He got $15 million or so for that last year. He would have gotten 30, but they cut him before that date. He was a team captain last year. He was productive last year. So why the hell are they letting him go?
Well, and then there's that issue with his hip. He missed some games with a hip injury. He mentioned it in his statement when he was released that he even spent time in the hospital of it. I wonder if Miami is worried that this hip thing could turn into a chronic issue.
Yeah, and maybe that's true. Maybe they figured they would suck it up and just cut him now and try to get ahead of that. And maybe that's the case. I don't know Miami's cap situation extremely well, so I don't know if they were just looking for ways to make room or whatever. But I can't imagine, this is what they envisioned a year ago. So to me, not enough people are asking that question. What changed in a 1 year deal? It was a big contract he got from Miami. So what changed in that 1 year? I think that those behind the scenes questions, we don't know enough about it yet. Right. And I'm sure, again, whether it's from the player and agent or from
it also might mean that some other moves that the Dolphins are planning on making, and he's
exactly, and so
someone that's a casualty of that.
And maybe they look at it and say, "Hey, we have Van Noy, we had him. We have a younger guy. They have that Van Ginkel linebacker. He played pretty well. Maybe they look at it and say, we have a cheaper option in-house. We can reallocate this money
and we can upgrade someplace else.
Yep, exactly. Maybe that's what they're looking to do. Again, I don't know. The first question to me, though, on Van Noy, again, is what kind of standing he has with the team. Obviously, he fits. If the team standing and him are in a good spot, then I think it should be a discussion. Is it likely? No, I don't think it's likely.
Okay.
And look, I think the Patriots have some interesting young guys in the mix of the front seven. I still think linebackers in need, even with the news that Donta Hightower is planning on coming back. But we don't know what kind of shape he's going to be in when he comes back. I've seen pictures of him. He looks like he's thin, but football playing shape is different than when you've been off a year and working out by yourself. And I just think that any of these opt-outs that people are talking about, the opt-outs coming back, that was the big news over the week, pretty much sharing what Devin McCourty had already said a week ago, but that's, whatever. So people are just going to chalk those back in. Like, I'm not penciling in any of these opt-outs. Like, Dan Vitale has to earn a job. Like Marcus Cannon, I don't think he's a lock to be here. We have all talked about how we don't expect him to be back at all. Patrick Chung, I think, has a role, but now you have a lot of guys at strong safety with the emergence of Kyle Duggar and Adrian Phillips, who was a great signing last year. So where does everybody fit? Again, I just think there's going to be some just because people are opting back in. Yep. I don't think you need to I think when you're filling out your roster depth chart this offseason, I would use a light number 2 pencil. I wouldn't use anything in ink.
Okay. Great stuff. Good stuff from you guys. Okay. Coming up next, we're going to look at the roster. We're going to go through positional groupings, positions, and we're going to say where and how should the Patriots upgrade. Should it be through free agency or should it be through the draft? So we're going to go through that next. Okay, guys. Obvious place we're going to start is here. Let's start at quarterback. Okay, now the way I'm presenting this is it's not just for this year, it's for beyond 2021 and beyond. How would you upgrade the quarterback position? We've already kind of talked about it. Derek, I'll go to you first. Actually, I'll get us started. For me, it's obvious. It's got to be through the draft. That's where you upgrade. You get a placeholder like we're talking about. Steve loves Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'm there with Steve. Bring in Ryan Fitzpatrick. But you
I don't love him. I just think he'd fit.
Fine. Fit.
If
the backtracking here coming up.
No, it's not backtrack. I was like, hey, the top guys aren't going to be there. And rather than some of the guys that have been bandied about, I would rather have a Ryan Fitzpatrick.
As a
placeholder. If you're asking me which free agent I would like to have, it would be Dak Prescott. But we know that ain't going to happen.
Okay, very good. All right. So I'm going with the upgrade being via the draft, first to second round, and I want it to be the first round. Derek, you say it needs to be probably higher in the first round. How are you upgrading the quarterback position?
Yeah, let's keep this section brief because we've kind of touched on it. The draft is the answer. That's for me. If you're talking about 2021 and beyond, I don't see a guy available, even really by trade, that people are talking about that I look at and say he's a solution for the next 3-4 plus years. I just don't look at that. To me, it has to be through the draft. Okay, Steve, are you in agreement or do you have a different take?
Draft.
Okay, all right. Let's go to running back now. You can always say stay pat at what we have. Steve, I'll start with you. How would you upgrade at running back for 2021 and beyond, or would you just keep it the way it is?
Well, I think they're set pretty well, but if I'm going to upgrade it, I don't want a free agent. I want a guy from the draft, and you can always find running backs in the draft, and I think they've been able to do that, and they'll be able to do that in the future.
Derek?
Totally agree with Steve. I look at it and say you have Damian Harris as your bell cow. You'll have Michelle around for at least one more year. They can kind of work together as a 1-2 combo. I'm hoping James White stays, but I could see him going to more of a team that's a contender. And who knows what Burkhead's status is going to be? He'll probably be back, but you probably can't count on him till more later in the year, anyways, which is fine. I agree with Steve. You can find a guy in the middle to late rounds of the draft. They've showed throughout the last years that they can identify guys and that they can kind of have a guy that red shirts or has a small role and then he blossoms a little bit. And I'll be curious to see if JJ Taylor takes on more this next year too.
Yep. Very interesting because we saw JJ Taylor at the beginning of the season, but we really did not see much of him after that. Yep. Okay. Here's the loaded position. One of them, Derek, how would you upgrade at wide receiver for 2021 and beyond? We know how the Patriots had drafted at wide receiver. Would you upgrade through free agency? And if you're going to say yes, how would you do it? Would you go for the high end or would you go for the second tier?
I would go for 2 guys in the second tier of free agency. That's what I would do.
You get the thumbs up from Steve Ballsherry.
I would love to get a guy like Chris Godwin or Allen Robinson. I don't think the Patriots are going to do that, but that would be obviously who wouldn't want a great football player on their team. Okay. But if you're talking about second tier wide receivers, I think you can double dip there in free agency.
I agree with you.
I'm looking for guys who are in their mid-20s, coming off their first contract, maybe need a change of scenery. Maybe they're just the teams that they're leaving are too tightly capped. I know Curtis Samuel's been talked about a lot.
I've heard that.
Okay, there's a lot of different guys. Corey Davis from Tennessee is another one. We could talk about that maybe next show and get into more of these free agents that we'll be targeting. But to me, I'm not drafting a guy high because I mean, at least At least if I'm them, I'm hoping they're not, because they've showed almost no ability to really do that.
Right.
But I would say go for the second tier free agents and double dip there.
Okay, Steve, you told me off air that it was the second tier free agents. So who would you be targeting?
I mentioned a lot of the same names that Derek did.
Okay.
Curtis Samuel and even a guy like Sammy Watkins.
Yeah, you mentioned him.
He's not a top tier guy. He's not a big name. But if you get a guy like Curtis Samuel and then add a guy like Sammy Watkins, I think you'll be in good shape with your passing offense.
Okay. I know Claire's going to be watching this part. Okay. Steve, over to you. How would you upgrade a tight end for 2021 and beyond? Kyle Rudolph is now available, and there's some very good tight ends. What would you do?
It would have to be free agency on this one, because especially right now in the draft, I think there's Kyle Pitts, and then there's a lot of other guys. So I don't really see unless by some minor miracle, Pitts falls down to 15, which I don't see happening. So you go for a guy that's established. You already have two young guys that they're not washing their hands of. They still have hope that these guys might develop, but you bring in an established veteran player and you go that route.
How about you, Derek?
I'm with Steve again on this one. I also go free agency. To me, if you're going to spend big money on a player, offensively in free agency, I can see it a lot more at tight end than I can at receiver based on this crop. And Jonnu Smith from the Titans is who I have my eye on.
Okay.
Hunter Henry, obviously another one. With Hunter Henry, the downside with Henry is, even though he's a great player, has had some injury issues. Jonnu Smith is someone who's electric with the ball in his hands, has a lot of speed and athleticism, has been very productive. Yeah, I think he would be a great fit here. And if the Patriots wanted to throw a lot of money at him, I'd be all for it. To me, obviously, Dalton Keene didn't really progress last year like really we hoped. He barely made it onto the field at all.
Well, we don't know who he is yet. I don't think
he's still and Devin Asiasi is right there, but I don't think you can go into this next season and say we're hoping Devin Asiasi is going to take the second year jump, right? There needs to be an established player next to him. If they go with a free agent that's a lower cost, I think Kyle Rudolph, I don't think he'll break the bank. As he was just released yesterday. But again, there's going to be a lot of guys who I think we don't know now, but by this time next week that we're going to know even more players on that realm. But I do think you need an established veteran as you help try to bring some of these other guys along. And that's why I wouldn't draft one either.
I totally agree. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about the offensive line. This is interesting because you can also include undrafted free agents because the Patriots have done really well there. So, Derek, over to you. How would you upgrade the offensive line? I know that there is talk that Marcus Cannon is coming back. I don't believe it. That's just me because I know some stuff from the past. So who knows? Who knows if he's going to come back? But there is talk that he is coming back. Where do you upgrade? How do you upgrade this offensive line?
Yeah, so I'll be curious about the Cannon situation too, if the team just moves on from him or whatever. But I'm expecting
it's a huge cap hit, by the way. It's his cap number is pretty high.
6, I want to say. I don't know. When Miguel listens back to the show, Miguel, let me know, please. And I hope you're doing well, bud. But to me, I expect Joe Thuney to kind of break the bank. The Cincinnati Bengals are all the rumors. They would make a lot of sense. The New York Jets, etc. He's going to be gone. You have Shaq Mason. David Andrews to me is the big one. I hate to pay centers a lot of money, but David Andrews to me makes that line so solid. And I just feel like losing him and Thuney would be a massive blow, kind of a gut check to your offensive line. So I would really hoping David Andrews stays around. So you have some pieces in place, but you have to worry about, okay, is Michael Onwenu with a great rookie year? Is he playing left guard for you now? Is he playing right tackle for you? And again, he can play right tackle. I think he probably projects better as a guard, but obviously it's harder to find, quality tackles than guards. So I again, another discussion for the team, what they're going to be having between Belichick and Ziegler and everyone else on the staff. So to me, I just wonder how they're going to do that. I'm expecting them to draft a couple of guys or pick some guys up in free agents like they always do every year.
It's a little bit of both.
Yep, it'll be a little bit of both. If they lose Andrews and Tooney, assuming they lose both guys, and Marcus Cannon doesn't go, I don't see how you just rely on the draft, though. I think they'll have to try to find some kind of veteran to help plug and play. You can't just have a bunch of young guys in the draft run out there. I just don't see that happening. So that situation will bear watching.
Okay, Steve, over to you. Derek brings up a good point because this might be a domino effect. Who stays? Who resigns with the Patriots?
Well, I think they're going to keep Andrews. I think Tooney's going to get paid somewhere else. But the one thing that they've drafted real well on is offensive line. So, I don't think they need to spend a lot of money on a veteran to bring him in. I think they're in good shape. I think Onwenu and Justin Herron, who they picked up last year, I think those guys are going to play big roles for you. They still have Isaiah Wynn, which, he's had some injury concerns. We're all aware of that. But I think if you bring, like Derek said, you bring back Andrews, I think they can pick up some guys in the draft. They've shown, especially with Dante Scarnecchia is still helping in that realm. I think they've shown that they can find good offensive linemen that can help you in that. So I don't think they're going to spend a lot of money there.
Okay, good stuff.
Before we switch to defense, real fast.
Sure,
this came across my Twitter account. I'm going to keep this brief because we already talked about quarterbacks.
Go ahead.
But Jalen Waddle just said on NFL Network that he prefers Mac Jones over Tua Tagovailoa, which
that's interesting.
Devonta Smith has said similar things in the past, where both of them now have picked Mac Jones over Tua. And I just find it interesting because these guys have only seen him for a little bit of time now, but not Mac Jones' teammates have spoken very highly of him. He was raved about at the Senior Bowl for his leadership, for picking up the offense really easily, and a lot of other people around the Senior Bowl. All you read is how great Mac Jones was, and to me, that just perks my ears up a little bit because I find that interesting when those kind of talents are recognizing him over someone who was established as a high pick the year before. We'll get into the quarterbacks more. I just thought that was a really interesting find as we're kind of sitting here doing the show live. And I know a lot of people are talking about, we talk about quarterbacks for the draft. Well, we know where Lawrence and Wilson and Fields and Lance, those guys are going to be high. I wonder if Mac Jones will be going higher than we think. And, the kind of endorsement that he's getting, I just think people need to pay attention to that. It's just something to kind of keep in mind here as we move forward.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, let's go to the other side of the ball. Steve, over to you first. I think this is a place that they really need to upgrade, and I want to say in free agency. How about you?
Yeah, I would think that there'll be some free agents out there, but there's also some really good draft capital out there.
Okay.
I think
so where do you start?
I think you start in the draft. I think you have to start getting guys who are, stronger, more athletic, more disruptive. And I think that's where it all starts. I think they need an influx of youth and speed in that front seven.
Okay, so you're going the draft as your upgrade, but as you mentioned, you could still see them bringing in a few players. Derek, do you agree or disagree with Steve on that?
I believe that as much as I said free agents for the offensive side of the ball, I think the draft should be more favored to the defensive side. Now, I do think the defensive line in particular, specifically the defensive line, I do think you need another veteran body, especially if you lose Lawrence Guy, but if they get, for example, Henry Anderson, a defensive lineman for the Jets, a good player. He's now a free agent. That is someone who I think the Patriots should target. But I also am not opposed to the Patriots drafting a guy in the middle rounds like a Tyler Shelvin from LSU, who's one of my favorite kind of mid-tier defensive tackles, who's an absolute behemoth on the defensive line. So I do think they need to draft somebody on that D line, but I think you're going to have to mix it a little bit with an established player because they need multiple guys on that line. It's not just a one guy fix.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Linebacker is definitely a need. We know, again, our reports are that Dante Hightower is coming back, even though Tony Maserati has his doubts by the way of the talk is coming out. But I think that Dante Hightower is coming back. So I'll just mention that. Over to you, Steve. How do you upgrade at linebacker? Again, there are probably going to be some good linebackers out there in the draft, but also through free agency. Where do you go?
I go again, draft. There's some really intriguing linebackers in the draft.
Yep.
And as we said, that the one thing that they don't have is they don't have those sideline to sideline guys. And as much as I love me some Levante David, they're not getting him. I don't think he's going to leave Tampa, but even if he does, he's going to command way too much money for the Patriots to get. They need guys like that. Now, I'm not saying guys like Josh Uche won't be that, but then they're not ready yet. And, Hightower coming back is good. I think they need that.
Okay.
But there's also some thumpers out there that you can pick up in the middle rounds that are still very athletic. I profiled one the other day. He's an Alabama guy, Dylan Moses. And, he was a guy that tore his ACL in 2019. He wasn't all the way back last year, and some people are like, "Whoa, he's now a third or fourth round guy." I would love to take a flyer on him in the fourth round.
Yeah, typically that's where those guys go, right? In that third, fourth round range. Guys that projected as higher picks.
Yep.
Guys in the third round. The third round is weird for the NFL draft. Russ, and I know this is putting you to sleep because you hate draft talk, but the third round is interesting.
I'm fine, Derek.
Because a lot of times there are guys in the third round that should be first rounders, and it's either character or injuries that are the reason why they fall that far. Dylan Moses with the knee injury was projecting as kind of a higher, probably a late first, early second pick before he tore his knee up. Again, now he drops back. If you can get him in the third, I think that'd be good value. And I agree with Steve too. About the linebackers. I also go free and see if Hightower's back, you have that leader in that room.
That's right. I think that's huge.
I think Anthony Jennings, he moved a lot slower than some expected, but he's only in his first year again. I'm curious to see what he looks like in his second year. Uche, I think they had really high hopes for coming into the year, and he was slowed down by injuries, but we saw some of what he can do, and I expect him to have a massive role in the front seven. And Winovich, I still think there's a little bit of a feeling out process there, but at the very least, I think when you look at Winovich as an obvious passing down, third down kind of situation, but I think you need to add some athleticism and some speed there. If they do not go quarterback at 15, linebacker or cornerback is where I'm targeting them to go. And they could have their pick potentially between a guy like Micah Parsons at Penn State, who some people have some character issue concerns about, which honestly I don't know enough about, and that's up to the team. That's up to them to evaluate what they're comfortable, how comfortable they are with that. And then Zaven Collins from Tulsa, who Steve did a profile on. He's one of my absolute favorite guys. He was a gymnast in high school, played a lot of different sports. He played quarterback and free safety, tried out for like 13 different college teams, ended up playing linebacker at Tulsa, putting on a bunch of weight, got faster. And they were so sure about him as an athlete that if they weren't going to play him at Tulsa at linebacker, they were going to play him at tight end. So, and to me, I thought Collins in this whole thing, and people have asked me about Collins. That's why I'm kind of expanding on this a little bit. But Collins, to me, a little too rich at 15. At the same time, he's not going to be there at 46 in the second round.
No.
He's going to go in the late first round area, probably in that 20, late, early, mid 20s-ish range. And that's going to be his sweet spot. So, I could see one of those two guys, the Patriots, going that direction. But bottom line is, we go back to this, Russ and Steve, they need to get faster and more athletic. That's the draft is where they should get these kind of guys. And there's, obviously we'll expand on more of our linebacker prospects, coming up closer to the draft. But there are some good quality guys in this class for that.
Okay, excellent stuff. Steve, over to you. Let's talk about cornerback. I think Derek already mentioned it. Sounds like he would draft a corner pretty high. How about you? Would it be through the draft, or would you try to get someone in free agency? I know that we're talking about Stephon Gilmore, and if he gets traded, if that happens, maybe you do through the draft or maybe free agency. Where do you go?
I go draft again because if you're paying for a top corner in free agency, you're paying more than you wanted to pay Stephon Gilmore.
Right.
And so why would you pay another guy that's not as good as Stephon Gilmore more money? I'm going with the draft, and then you get him on those rookie contracts. There's always plenty of good corners out there. So and one of them, second, third round guy, played at your alma mater.
Oh, and I know who you're going to talk about there. Very good there, Steve.
You
All
follow
right.
Melon Fonwu. I covered him in high school. 6'3", 215. He's an athletic freak. I'm telling you.
At Syracuse, Steve, I'm not going to disagree with you there. Derek, how about you?
Well, to me, it kind of goes back to our conversation about Gilmore, Jackson. There are some questions to be answered there. Now, again, I think the Patriots generally operate under best player available in the draft. So some of these questions we might see kind of unfold before our eyes in the picks 1 to 14. Maybe Micah Parsons is gone and they liked him, but now Patrick Surtain from Alabama or Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech or J.C. Horn from Steve's favorite South Carolina, one of them are in their lap. Well, maybe you go ahead and you go that direction there. It's hard to know about the first round, but to me, if you're talking about how to improve the cornerback position, I still go again. I go draft again. Maybe, a middle round guy who you see you have some upside, who doesn't have to play necessarily right away because you have some of the other players, but you need to develop that pipeline. And cornerback's an important one to develop. So again, I go draft cornerback here as well.
Okay, let's end with safety. This is interesting. Do you do anything at safety, Derek?
I think safety is actually it hasn't been talked about enough, in my opinion, because obviously people look at it and say, oh, well, they're set at safety. Well, yeah, in a sense, but we don't really know exactly where Patrick Chung stands in terms of what kind of shape he's in, and what's his role? What's Duggar's role? What's Phillips' role? How many of these guys can they play on the field at the same time? Not to mention Devin McCourty, he has maybe 1 more year, 2 more years before I think he walks away. And behind him, I would argue right now your safety depth chart is all strong safeties. They don't have a free safety as the next guy. If they didn't have so many other holes, and if there was some kind of safety prospect that I thought was high enough in the first round, I might go that route because I could see them. They always like to draft a player a year before they really need him to kind of work him in slowly. I could see a safety in the second or third round. I'm sure everyone's loving the idea of a defensive back in the second round, but I could see someone who could be the eventual kind of heir to McCourty, because I don't think enough people have talked about the free safety depth chart. I know strong safety is a lot of guys. Free safety to me is definitely a little bit of a concern. Maybe it's one of those things they say, look, it's a need, but we're going to have to wait till next offseason because right now we have too many other, pots on the stove that we got to worry about.
Okay. Steve, do you draft another safety, as Derek said, to be the heir apparent to Devin McCourty?
Well, I think they'll draft another safety, but I think the heir apparent to Devin McCourty's already here. And I think that's Kyle Duggar.
You think it's Duggar? Okay.
I think it's Duggar. I think they're going to move him to free safety. We remember what an athletic freak this kid is.
Yeah.
And he did play a lot of free safety in college. Now, granted, that was a really, really small school. But I think, with Patrick Chung coming back for at least 1 more year, and they have, Phillips, who played really well.
Maybe that gives you that opportunity to make the switch.
I think, when they go to those sub packages where they move Devin McCourty down into the slot, I think you're going to start seeing Kyle Duggar next year move into that old slot where they used to bring in. Now I'm drawing a blank on him.
Tank Williams or something like the money.
No. The free safety. Oh Jesus!
Good radio right here. Clip this.
Yeah, I just had it on the tip of my tongue. Okay. But yeah, I think they're going to move him into that free safety role. I think he's the heir apparent to.
And you know what? That's a good point. That's a good point, Steve. I look at it, and because of Duggar's role last year, and part of me's looking at it and say it looks like they envisioned Duggar as a strong safety based on last year, but at the same time, maybe they just said, okay, this guy's making a big jump from a lower level college to the NFL. What do we know what does he feel comfortable doing? What do we feel comfortable having him do right now? And it was in that role. And then next year we see him, okay, now we can give him a little bit more and a little bit more. And you work him into that free safety because obviously in that, strong safety, obviously you are kind of working a lot more in the box, where free safety, you're going into the back end of the defense. I wonder if with Duggar having a second year and hopefully a full off season of training, as long as the NFL allows it with protocols, et cetera, I'm wondering if this next year you could see him morph into more of that. And I think that's a really good point.
Oh, good stuff. All right, guys, to finish up, we're going to finish where we kind of began.
Oh, God. Okay? We talk about Minshew again.
Here it goes. This is from our friend Thomas Murphy. Good thing that the Pats have 11 picks in the first 2 rounds so that they can rebuild like you 3 want. Laugh out loud.
I would say to Murph, I'm just saying in general I think what our discussion is kind of showing everyone or talking about with everyone is there's a lot of needs on this team.
That's right.
And that's why I'm not as rose-colored glasses about them being contenders in 1 year. It's going to be a several-year process, and I've said that from the beginning. Quarterback is by far more important, but I don't care if you brought in Deshaun Watson tonight. The Patriots are not Super Bowl contenders with this roster. So they have holes to fill. So and the other thing too is obviously the quarterback is the most necessary in order to really be successful in this league. But you have no idea where the board's going to fall the way it is, and so I just feel like that night we're going to be able to dictate exactly where they're kind of leaning based on the teams ahead of them. Obviously, and so to me, obviously, if you had a lot of first-round draft picks in a class like this, which I think is pretty strong, yeah, you could get a lot better in a hurry. But the point is they're going to have to figure out where they want to at best allocate their higher-end assets for draft, how they're going to spend their money in free agency, and what problems that they're going to kind of choose to not really ignore, but pass the buck off the next offseason, because it's going to take a couple of years of real smart decisions and good drafting to get back to where everybody wants to go.
And by the way, it was Deron Harmon that I was talking
Deron Harmon.
I had it on the tip of my tongue, and then it just went.
Steve, this is I was a former co-host with Murph, and I knew Murph would chime in, and that's fair. And Murph, I love you. Steve, I'm going to give you final word on Murph.
Well, the scotch must be flowing free in the Murph household today.
Jealous.
We'll just leave it there.
Okay.
I mean, I think he was drinking some scotch when he said Gardner Minshew for a 3rd rounder. So,
okay, very good. Before we go, I do want to mention this because again, I did include Mike Diabate and Murph in my Russ's rant. Please do check out Mike's podcast, which is great, Locked On Patriots, and of course, One Patriot Place with Murph and Steve. Excellent podcast. We have some great podcasts, and listen, we're lucky. We just talked about the Patriots for an hour. And anyone that listens, please do subscribe to the Pats Fans YouTube channel. We want to build that up. Please do subscribe. Listen to us on Apple iTunes. Please listen as well. Please subscribe there. Because you know what? What we just did in this hour is better than anything you're going to listen to on the radio or watch on TV. We do a better job. Help us find other Patriots fans by subscribing on YouTube, on iTunes. Please help us because we want other Patriots fans to see what we're about. We've been doing this now for almost 10 years. And I'm telling you, we are among the best talking Pats. I believe it. But I believe it.
And when you listen to Locked On Patriots, be sure to listen every Tuesday.
Because that includes the wonderful Steve Ballsherry.
Yeah, there you go. I would say also, just because we are talking about some of the other options, I have found it funny listening to. Thank you. I would say just funny listening to some of the airwaves in Boston, 98.5 EEI, specifically 2 to 6 Monday through Friday. The Feller and Mass, which I've told you before, I'll keep this brief. Feller and Mass, to me, they always make me laugh. I think for the most part they're entertaining. Okay, they can really beat a dead horse like nobody's business.
Derek, Derek, do they care about us as Patriots fans?
No, they don't. No, we're all nerds compared to that. That's what they would say, and that's fine. But I'm good with that. But what I find funny is they have spent since the moment the Patriots season ended, and I'm sure going on currently right now.
Yep.
They've done nothing but break their own commandment, which is get somebody in trouble for something they haven't done. They have killed the Patriots for not doing anything about the quarterback position before they'd have the ability to do something. The amount of contradiction is hilarious.
They're so hypocritical, it's not even funny. But you know what? That's why I want, again, I'll talk up a lot of these podcasts. We all do a very good job. And we're lucky to have all of these different podcasts. And I just want to mention, like I said, it's not just Patriots 4th and 2. It's Locked On Patriots. It's One Patriot Place. There's so many of them. Evan Lazard does a great job as well on CLNS. They do a wonderful. There's so many good podcasts. Please watch and listen to those, because I think you're going to get more out of what you really want. Because I know I certainly don't get much out of what I want when I listen and watch. What?
Sco with Mark Schofield.
Yep,
awesome
another good one.
Stuff.
Exactly. Listen, there are so many of them, and Mark is great, and there are so many great podcasts. Check them out. All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. For my co-host Steve Balster and Derek Havens, I'm Russ Coleman. As always, thank you for watching and listening to Patriots 4th and 2, the official podcast of PatsFans.com.